Welcome to the second part of the Donauschwaben-Tour where we cycled from Linz to Carei. Enjoy the video. We traveled from Linz to Grein in 65 kilometers in stage 12. Linz is with more than 200,000 inhabitants the third biggest city in Austria after Wien and Graz. After the Second World War, Linz earned itself the image of a dusty steel city because of its heavy industry. There is still a lot of industry in the city as we have seen cycling through it. But in more recent history, Linz has changed its reputation to an internationally recognized cultural city with the focus on contemporary and modern art. The street art and graffiti scene are also a huge part of today's Linz. We are now in Gusen, where you can find a relic from a very dark chapter of history, the Gusen concentration camp, an outer camp of the famous KZ Mauthausen. In the year 1938, Nazi Germany annexed Austria, and in December 1939 they already started building this concentration camp, which was liberated on the 5th of May 1945 by US soldiers. In the 5 years of its existence, 60 to 70,000 prisoners from all over Europe have been detained here for their ethnicity, religion, political opinion, sexuality, or many other inhumane reasons. 35,000 people, which is half of the people that were ever imprisoned here, died because of the horrible living conditions or the heavy work in the camp. We are entering the Keltendorf in Mitterkirchen. It is an open-air museum that shows the life of Celtic tribes in the years from 800 to 450 BC. Normally they would even offer a lot of workshops to give the visitors deeper insight into Celtic life, but that was not possible because of COVID. Nevertheless, a walk through the Celtic wooden houses in the village was already interesting, and the exhibitions gave a good impression about the life back then. As we were cycling through the town square in Grein, we have reached our destination for this stage. Grein is a very idyllic little town that is built into the side of a hill. In the evening we decided to take a closer look at Grein and afterwards watched the Champions League finale in the city center. Stage 13 led us from Grein to Melk in 55 kilometers. In Ybbs an der Donau we took a break because we wanted to visit the bike museum there. The Fahrradmuseum in Ybbs shows the evolution of the bicycle throughout the years. Without this great invention, our tour would not have been possible in the first place. We have arrived in Melk, where you can see one of the highlights of the tour, the Benedictine monastery Melk. We visited this amazing complex at the beginning of the next stage. For now, let's enjoy Melk's old town and some first impressions of the monastery. Now let's come to the most stunning stage of the entire trip, stage 14. Through the beautiful Wachau we traveled 60 kilometers from Melk to Treismauer. Before we went back on the road, we first visited Melk's must-see Benedictine Abbey fortress, the Stift Melk. It has been built in the years from 1702 to 1746. Stift Melk is one of the most breathtaking Baroque buildings in the entire world, and as you can see, the view over the surrounding area is great. The monastery church looks already impressive from the outside, but the inside was decorated with so much gold as we have never seen in any other church. Sadly, we cannot show any pictures from the inside of the monastery, as taking photos was forbidden in the interior. Stift Melk is not only beautiful on the inside but also on the outside. The Baroque garden with the pavilion, which you can see here, and the Paradise Garden are proof of that. We are now at another highlight of this day, the castle ruins of Burg Ackstein, the origins of which date back to the 12th century. With the castle's strategic place on the mountain, the shipping on the Danube could be controlled in the Middle Ages. Nowadays, the amazing view over the Wachau and the Danube turned the castle ruins into a popular tourist attraction. Wachau is the name of this stunning stretch of the Danube Valley between Melk and Krems and belongs to the UNESCO World Heritage. It is famous as one of the most romantic sections of the Danube Valley because of its terraced vineyards and forested slopes, as you can now see for yourselves. After this awesome stage, we arrived at our destination, Traismauer, and watched the sunset over the Danube. In stage 15, we cycled from Traismauer to the Austrian capital Wien, which took us 70 kilometers. We have just entered the historic center of Wien, the Stephansplatz. In the middle of the square you can see one of Wien's most famous sites, the Stephansdom. The origins of the Roman Catholic cathedral date back to the year 1137, and it is a Gothic church as you can recognize by the pointed arches. Characteristic and visible from far away is the 136 meters high South Tower. The North Tower, on the other side, remained unfinished for various reasons, one of them being economic difficulties. Present day, the North Tower is only half as high as the South Tower, but it gives shelter to one of Europe's biggest church bells, the so-called Pummerin. On the left you can also see a lot of pretty carriages, which are characteristic for Wien, the so-called Wiener fiacres. Here you can see the Wiener Pestsäule and the Hungarian coat of arms at the basis of the pillar, as Hungary has been a part of the Austrian Empire for centuries. The pillar itself was erected 1679 after one of the last plague epidemics in Wien. Under the Emperor Leopold I, this pillar was erected to thank God for the end of the epidemic. Today the Pestsäule has gained importance once again, as many people come here to ask for a lenient ending of the corona pandemic. In the night we took a walk to the Wiener Hofburg, the former principal imperial palace of the Habsburg dynasty. You can see the Heldenplatz, which translates to Heroes Square, in front of the Hofburg. In the middle stands the equestrian statue of Prince Eugen, who fought off the Ottomans in the Ottoman War. We ended the night in the museum's quarter, which was very vivid and full of people at night, so we took a drink and enjoyed the sparkling atmosphere. In stage 16 we traveled from the Austrian capital Wien to the Slovakian capital Bratislava in 80 kilometers. Remember when I have told that the day we won between Ingolstadt and Regensburg would come in handy later? Well, it was here in Wien where we had to stay for another day because my brother got a sunstroke. Once more we feared that this would be the end of our trip, but my brother got somewhat better after a day of rest, and so we could start stage 16 on day 17 of our journey. We are now cycling out of Wien and holding course towards the Austrian-Slovakian border. Looking back, the stages in Austria have been really amazing. The country is a perfect combination of breathtaking nature and interesting culture. One day we were cycling through the idyllic vineyards of the Wachau, the next day we were already exploring the imperial buildings of Wien. Furthermore, we have to say that the Austrian part of the Danube cycle path was the most developed. The Austrian section was almost entirely asphalted and close to the shore so that you could enjoy the Danube while cycling. We have left Austria and the German-speaking area behind and entered a new country, Slovakia. We were only cycling in Slovakia for 2 days, but we were still very excited and looking forward to getting to know the country. In the UFO, there is a tower restaurant, and the tower itself is part of the bridge of the Slovak National Uprising on which we crossed the Danube. In the distance you can see Bratislava Castle, which is the dominant feature of Slovakia's capital due to its size and location. Bratislava is the only capital in the entire world that borders more than one neighboring country, since it borders Austria and Hungary. The city might not be as big as some other European capitals, but that does not mean that Bratislava is more boring than them. To the contrary, we have not seen any other old town on our trip that was as joyful and vivid as this one. It is not a coincidence that the Slovakian capital has the image of an open-minded city. It almost felt like the COVID pandemic did not even exist here, and even after we went back to our hostel, we could still hear people partying in the streets for the whole night. our 17th stage, we cycled 90 kilometers from Bratislava to the Hungarian city Győr. After our short but nice stay in Slovakia, we were crossing the Danube and thereby entering Hungary, happy that we made it to the fourth country of our trip. We were lucky because we crossed the border on the 29th of August, and on the 1st of September, Hungary already closed its borders for incoming foreigners as a measure against the COVID pandemic. On the road, we met a nice group of people that navigated us to our destination of this stage, Győr. Győr is a bit further away from the Danube, but we still decided to stay here overnight as Győr is one of the major Hungarian cities with a great city center. The main square is the pretty Széchenyi tér, which we visited in the night. Győr has also a good economy. The most important employer is a production site of Audi cars at the edge of the city. We continued our journey from Győr to Komárom. Stage 18 was 45 kilometers long. As you can see, the quality of the Eurovelo 6 became a bit worse in Hungary. Some sections were proper cycle paths, but most of the time the Eurovelo 6 now led us on roads like this one, between cars and trucks. Fort Monostor is a part of the fortification system of Komárom. It was built between 1850 and 1871. Between the two world wars, the fort was used by the Royal Hungarian Army as barracks and as a training center. Between 1945 and 1991, the Soviets' biggest ammunition storage was in this fortress. Nowadays, the fort does not have a military purpose anymore, and it is now open for visitors as a museum. We are now on the main square of Komárom. After the First World War, the border between the newly formed Czechoslovakia and Hungary was drawn along the Danube. That is the reason why this town got split into two parts. The Slovakian part called Komárno on the left side of the Danube and the Hungarian part called Komárom on the right side of the Danube. The two parts of the town are connected by the so-called Bridge of Friendship. On the bike, we always used cycling gloves to prevent blistering on our hands. As a result, after 18 days of cycling in the summer, our hands looked completely pale compared to our arms. Stage 19 led us from Komárom to Esztergom in 55 kilometers. We are cycling into Esztergom, a town that is steeped in history. It is one of Hungary's oldest towns, and it was here where the Kingdom of Hungary was founded. In the year 1000, István was crowned the first Christian king of Hungary in Esztergom. From the foundation of the kingdom until the year 1256, Esztergom was even the capital of the kingdom. The town is still very important to this day, as it is known as Hungary's Catholic stronghold. The Archbishop of Esztergom, who is the head of the Hungarian Church, resides in this town. Here you can see the town's landmark, the magnificent Basilica of Esztergom. At the front it says the following sentence in Latin: "The head, mother and teacher of the Hungarian Church, as it is Hungary's biggest and most important church." It was built between 1822 and 1869. Next to the basilica is also the former royal castle of the Kingdom of Hungary. The basilica was built on a hill. From there you have a great view over Esztergom, the Danube, and Esztergom's Slovakian sister town Sturovo. The altarpiece inside the basilica is 13.5 times 6.5 meters big and is the biggest painting in the world that was painted on one piece of canvas. It shows the Assumption of Mary. As I have promised in stage 2, here in Esztergom you can now see the German-style yellow road sign pointing towards Esztergom's partner city Ehingen. The sign says that by car Ehingen is 836 kilometers away. Turns out by bike and following the Danube the distance is a bit longer. In stage 20 we left Esztergom and cycled 80 kilometers to the Hungarian capital Budapest. This section of the Danube is called the Danube Bend. The Danube takes an almost 90 degrees curve and it changes its course from east to south. Visegrad is another important Hungarian town and former royal residence. On the hill you can see Visegrad's famous upper castle. Here you can see a part of Visegrad's lower castle. We did not take a closer look at the town because of the rain. We have arrived at Hungary's capital, Budapest. It is also Hungary's most beautiful and biggest city with more than 1.7 million inhabitants. The city is full of stunning historic buildings like Buda Castle or the Hungarian parliament that you can see here. But Budapest has also a great nightlife and it is simply very easy to enjoy yourself here. Furthermore, the Hungarian capital is another city that is split by the Danube, which adds to the city's great atmosphere. The older part, Buda, is on the west side of the Danube, while the newer part, Pest, is on the east side of the Danube. We are now crossing the Danube on the Széchenyi chain bridge. The chain bridge, which was opened in 1849, was the first permanent bridge across the Danube in Hungary, and it is the most beautiful of the 7 bridges that connect Buda and Pest. Now it is also time to say goodbye to our constant companion, the Danube, because we see it here for the last time. In the next stage, we are going to leave the Danube cycle path and continue our journey eastward through the Hungarian Puszta. This is an iconic train station of Budapest, the Keleti pályaudvar. In case you were wondering how we got back home to Ravensburg together with our bikes, here's the story. First we thought the best way back home would be by train because of our bicycles. So we tried to buy a train ticket here, but it turned out that there was no direct way back and it would have cost us several more days. Lucky for us, we instead found someone who could transport us and our bikes directly back to Ravensburg in a small bus. Stage 21 led us from Budapest to Jászberény in 80 kilometers. In Budapest, our SD cards became full and we bought a new one at the Chinese market for a cheap price. Looking back, we should not have done that because we found out at the end of the stage that the SD card did not actually work, leaving us with this undocumented stage. In Jászberény, we bought a new SD card which finally worked and the rest of the journey is properly documented again. Stage 22 was one of the longest stages of our trip. We cycled from Jászberény to Tiszafüred in 105 kilometers. We put our masks on to protect ourselves from the big amount of mosquitoes in this area. In this stage we followed the new river, the Tisza, which is a tributary of the Danube. This section was very beautiful. We were cycling on well-developed cycle paths along the river and through great nature. Especially the lake Tisza was amazing. As I have promised, the lake was the absolute highlight of this stage. It is a very popular tourist attraction in Hungary and for a good reason, as you can see. We were very lucky as we even caught the sunset over the lake. After this great stage, we arrived at our destination, Tiszafüred, late at night. In stage 23, we cycled 75 kilometers from Tiszafüred to Debrecen. Here we can see the Kilenc-lyukú híd or nine-holed bridge in Hortobágy. Hortobágy is a small town in the Hungarian Puszta, which is famous for the Hortobágy National Park that surrounds the town. The traditional pastoral culture in the national park is a part of the UNESCO World Heritage, and we learned a few things about it in the Pastor Museum. When people think of Hungary, they often think of the Puszta, an idyllic and traditional plain region with dry fields and flocks of sheep, as you can see here. It was very pleasant for us to cycle through this peaceful and calm area. We have arrived at Hungary's second biggest city, Debrecen, with more than 200,000 inhabitants. Debrecen is also a university city, and a friend from Carei studies here. He kindly let us stay at his place overnight, and we spent a great time in Debrecen together with friends from Carei. This will be the 24th and final stage of our tour, from Debrecen to our destination Carei. We have arrived at the Hungarian-Romanian border. Sadly, Romania is not yet part of the Schengen zone, and because of that there are still border controls. The border police was of course very surprised when we told them from where we have cycled here. We have finally made it to our destination, Carei. Because of the high percentage of Hungarians and Danube-Swabians in the town, it also says the Hungarian town name Nagykaroly and the German town name Großkarol on the sign. One can imagine how happy we were to finally see the sign of our second home. The sense of achievement was great and we were glad that our plan worked out in the end. We are now coming full circle with the beginning of our journey. As promised, here you can see the memorial plaque commemorating the Sotmarer Schwaben that lived in Carei and the Sotmar district. More than 300 years later, my father, my brother and I have traveled the same route as they did, only that instead of boats and carriages we traveled by bike. This memorial commemorates the Hungarian Count Carei Sándor who offered the Swabians lands at the beginning of the 18th century. So he was mainly responsible that it came to the settlement of the Sotmarer Schwaben in the region. This is the town's most beautiful place, the Carei Castle and its castle garden. The castle was the residence of the Carei Hungarian noble family. Here you can see the Romanian soldiers' monument and the atmospheric square that is surrounding it. We are now on our way to my grandparents and thereby coming to the end of our journey. It has been a wild ride and we have definitely enjoyed every bit of it. We have seen a lot of beautiful nature like the Wachau or Lake Tisza and a lot of amazing cities like Wien, Bratislava or Budapest. In the end, we hope that we could bring across these amazing places and the atmosphere of our journey through this video, and we thank you for watching.